Support comes from the Janice Hawkins Cultural Arts Park on the main campus of Troy University, featuring the International Arts Center, the Fred Nall Hollis Museum, and the Hua Baoju Gallery. More information at troy.edu/artspark.
From Troy Public Radio, this is In Focus, and I'm Carolyn Hutchison. Some of Alabama's most intriguing criminal cases involve women. When he was a night reporter for the Birmingham News, Jeremy Gray began tracking down stories about women in Alabama's criminal history. He compiled the stories into a book, Wicked Women of Alabama, published by the History Press. Today, we talk with Jeremy, who introduces us to a woman who claimed to be the lover of John Wilkes Booth, Abraham Lincoln's assassin. Jeremy Gray, thank you so much for joining us by Skype from Moody, Alabama.
Hi, glad to be here.
Jeremy, you're a former night reporter for the Birmingham News, and you're now a managing producer for Alabama Media Group, which includes several newspapers as well as AL.com. I take it you've been chasing crime stories for many years.
Correct. I was based in Birmingham and would go out on calls, had the police scanner, all that, and now I oversee crime coverage across Alabama for the different papers and AL.com.
You've written an eye-opening book about women criminals, and the book's title is Wicked Women of Alabama. What made you want to tackle women criminals in literature?
Well, obviously, men commit the vast majority of crimes and violent crimes at that. So these cases were fewer and far between, and they were just so interesting. We had the poisoners of the 1950s. We had Marie Hilly, obviously, in Anniston. There was a connection to the Manson family. Virginia Hill, who I've always been fascinated with for her association with Bugsy Siegel, the Prohibition-era gangster. So, I mean, there were just some really notable cases. They were very different from each other, but just some really interesting stories behind these women and the notorious crimes they were linked to.
Briefly, why do women choose poisoning rather than guns when they're doing these murders, these women criminals?
Well, in the 50s and before that, there weren't really a lot of autopsies. There were a lot of chemicals that were cheap, readily available. Women in that particular era were largely responsible for taking care of the home, preparing meals. People trusted them to bring them their coffee or their milk or their whiskey or whatever, and people got sick and died of a wide range of illnesses. So it didn't really raise a lot of questions. I mean, you go back to the 19th century in Europe and other parts of America, these kinds of cases happened a lot more frequently than they do now, because if you die under suspicious circumstances now, you're more likely to get tested and then somebody will get found out. But back then it was easy to get away with it.
Rat poison, arsenic, those were some of the poisons of choice. But let's drop back and talk about a case that you covered in your book, Wicked Women of Alabama. Louise Wooster, the madam who saved Birmingham from cholera, claimed that she was the love of John Wilkes Booth's life. Can you explain that?
Right, and actually, I'll just say that all of her accounts should be taken with a grain of salt. She's a fascinating figure in Birmingham history. She came to Birmingham not long after the city became a city, and there was a cholera epidemic, and when the people fled Birmingham, she turned her house of quote unquote ill repute into a hospital. She tended to sick people. And she, to this day, is a very beloved figure in Birmingham. She started off her life in Mobile, just a life of tragedy, parents dying, her and her sisters were being passed around. And like a lot of young women in unfortunate circumstances, she turned to sex work. And she lived in Montgomery before the start of the Civil War, as did John Wilkes Booth, who was an actor. And she claimed that they had a love affair, and she seemed to believe that he was driven largely by his alcoholism, which he was, I believe, very well known to have had an addiction to alcohol. But yeah, so she claimed that it was sort of an ill-fated love affair with one of the most notorious figures in American history.
Well, on page 23 of your book, she explains further. Can you share that paragraph?
Right. She wrote that Booth loved the Union and said his, quote, strange, erratic nature, end quote, that fateful night he gunned down President Lincoln at the Ford's Theater was the result of him being, quote, crazed by drink. She said that he believed his terrible act would end the war and save the South. Quote, had the devil not tempted him at that fatal moment, what a bright star would he have been? I knew he was impulsive, erratic, but I never believed him capable of murder. I do not believe he ever intended murder. Though the world may condemn him, I love him still, end quote. I think some of that's doubtful. There was obviously a bit of a conspiracy around the assassination of the president and attempts on other federal officials around that same time. But she made this claim through years. She said she kept a scrapbook full of mementos. She said she had a monogrammed handkerchief and letters he wrote. As far as whether that's all true, I don't know, but it is known that she did live in Montgomery around the same time he did. So could their paths have crossed? Could they have had a relationship? Quite possibly. And she may have had some insight into him that others may not have had.
And Jeremy, she weighed the events of her life, and she weighed her sins against redemption. And her redemption apparently was through helping those who needed help during this cholera epidemic.
Right. And even after she tried to live a little bit more of a quiet life, she wasn't always successful, but she would take care of the women who worked for her as sex workers in her later years and tended to them in ill health and took care of their children. And there's a public health award given out in Birmingham in her honor every year. There's a loft apartments in Birmingham named after her. So for someone who was a sex worker in the late 19th century, early 20th century in the Bible Belt, she's held in quite high regard even today.
Well, Jeremy, we're out of time for today, but let's talk again more about your book, Wicked Women of Alabama. This is fascinating, and it's an eye-opening book.
Well, I really appreciate it, and I look forward to it.
Joining us by Skype was reporter Jeremy Gray of Moody, Alabama. His book is Wicked Women of Alabama, and we'll look forward to bringing you more of the stories he's collected. Thanks for joining us today for In Focus, which is now a podcast on NPR One or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Carolyn Hutchison, and this is listener-supported Troy Public Radio.